Hi. Okay,
All
thank you
right.
so much for doing the interview.
Yeah, no issue.
Okay, so I'm just going to ask you a few questions because I know you were former Relay ambassador.
Hmm.
Okay, so one, what do you do for a living?
Okay, so first for a living, on top of being a full-time student, what I do primarily is that I run an end-to-end merchandising business. So pretty much from conception to finalization regarding the products that I sell and work on for clients. I handle it from start to finish and even fulfillment, which is like packaging and shipping as well. Right.
That's great. How long have you been in your own business and why did you join the company?
So I've been running my business for like 2 years now, but only really been taking the measures to, what's the word for it? Make it more legitimized within the past years, I would say. But on top of just the business itself, even expanding to traveling to different concerts across the states to very merchandise for different artists, yeah, I would say the past 2 years. But that's mainly what I do, but I also have a side job where I'm an e-commerce specialist. So I've been an e-commerce specialist to go back to the previous question for about a year, maybe longer than that actually, probably close to 3 to 4. But that's just my side job in comparison to the business that I fully run myself.
So how is it balancing that? Because I know college can be a lot, and doing a business that could be really hard.
I would say it's a lot. You just gotta, the main thing in order to be able to juggle it all is by enhancing or expanding how you view your day to day or week to week. So foresight is going to be the main thing that's going to help you balance it all, to be honest. Because if you look at it on a day to day basis, you only have so many hours in a day in the sense that you can't do everything in one day. You know what I mean? So you have to view it on a week to week basis in order to be able to block it out a lot better. So I would say the main thing that helps is time management. Although I'm personally not the best at it, I still get everything done. But that's just me being honest. But I say that to say that that's kind of what are some the challenges that come with doing all of it, especially being a full-time student. But luckily now I'm in person. Not my bad. I'm online now. I used to be in person, but being online at school has helped a ton regarding being able to handle my jobs, plural, and really being able to have the time to go in person for my other job.
Yes, so this is going to be recorded and I think it's going to be live on Facebook. So if you just want to drop the name of your business, this could be really good for advertising.
Yeah, so as much as I would like to personally,
And that's
personally,
okay if you don't want to.
yeah, pretty much just personally, I'd rather not. But it's nothing wrong with it. It's just like I'd rather keep it. I'll go ahead and say what it is. I mean, it's NGX, but the main client that I have that we do merchandising for is Nova Gang. It's a music group slash collective, and they're on the way to becoming an independent label. But yeah, that's my primary client right now.
Okay, that's great. So are you familiar with Relay and could you provide a short overview?
So Relay Heroes from whenever I was in it. So really in general, from what I recall and know still to this day, they primarily focus on helping a lot of the students that they bring in, for lack of better words, whether it be giving them access to things that they would have other eyes have access to, or putting them in better positions long term, even career wise. So that's what I mainly recall about Relay and what I know about Relay. Mostly the opportunities, a lot of opportunities, because I would say the founders and even the people on the board do a lot to care for the students that they, bring in.
Okay, so I'm going to give my short overview, but your overview was great. Relay is a readiness program for kids through ninth and 11th grade, helping kids get scholarship money and open up new possibilities to kids that they never knew were possible, financial literacy courses, and so many more opportunities. So, what was your favorite thing that Relay did for individuals or the community?
One of my favorite things that Relay's done for individuals, oh, I can break it down between the community and the group itself. So for the group itself, one thing that I remember taking to heart, for lack of better words, is how they prepared us with headshots. Like we had a session or a meeting where we all did headshots together. And that helped me more ways than not because that more than just the actual headshot itself, it made me realize like how on the horizon the workforce really is, as well as knowing the fact that because it's so close, it's time to really start getting serious, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when you're in high school, things can seem a little bit fleeting, but really adulthood is right up on the horizon. So I say that to say relay has definitely helped put me in a better position, even outside of scholarships, in a better position to be able to take that on a lot easier in that transition to being a part of, the workforce, not necessarily in the blue collar way, but also even with college, right? So with
Hmm.
colleges, whenever you have interviews or whenever you're applying for internships at that point too, to go along with your studies, those are also equally as important. Um, which ties into your presentation, right? So your presentation is just as important, and your headshot helps with that in a way that allows your employer, your professors, etc., to get a better understanding of who it is that they're talking or trying to communicate to, especially at job fairs. But that aside, that's just internally what I recall. Now, for the community, I know that we did a lot. One thing that I really do remember greatly was
Hmm.
whenever we did a back to school drive where we gave out backpacks, um, school supplies, etc., to the community that we were in. And so that was like one thing that I vividly remembered that allowed us to give back in a way that we otherwise wouldn't have been able to.
That's really great. Um, so one of my favorite memories is that when I auditioned, like there was just a bunch of people around me that like we were just all trying our best to get in, and after the meeting, after we got in, it was just all like we really got to meet each other. So that's one of my favorite memories. And so, in one sentence, what could you describe Relay as?
In one sense, I would describe relay as, I would say, you said a sentence, right? Not a word, a sentence.
Yeah, sentence.
Okay, sentence. I would describe relay as an important stepping stone for students alike.
So, do you think that you had more of an edge when you got to college than the other kids that didn't do Relay?
I would say so. Even aside from the aspects of like the teachings that it provides, I would say even with the scholarships, it's definitely up a ton as well. Um, with Relay, for what it did for me, it gave me a better idea of how to approach college when I got there. So it wasn't more so scrambling to figure things out as soon as I got there. It's more so like, okay, I know what to expect. Now it's about going through and staying steady within those expectations, if that makes any sense.
Okay. How much easier has Relay made your college experience?
To be honest, when it comes to your first year in college, there's a lot that goes on. So a lot of the things that it sets you up with and for are a lot more subconscious than like consciously on your mind. They aren't really things that you think at the forefront of your head, but realize when you look back on the fact that makes sense. So when it comes to a lot of the meetings that we had, a lot of things that we did, it was more so being in college was more so a moment of like, oh, I see now, if that makes any sense. Like a moment of resonance as opposed to
Yeah.
like, yeah, if that
You
makes
were
any
just doing it
sense.
in high school just to do it.
Yeah, but then once you get college, you realize why you're doing it, if that makes sense.
Mm,
You know?
that's really great. Um, who, what do you think played a important role in where you are today?
An important what in played important role in who I am today?
Like,
Mm, my bad. You can go ahead.
like, what did you do that really made a difference where you are today? Like, what did you need to do to start the courage to get your own business, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so I would start off from there with stating that in some more so coming to terms with who I am and my perspective and charging that perspective or treading forward with that perspective and being confident in it to know that I have the capabilities to do what my perspective is allowing me to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So to pivot back a little bit, um, so I've been working in creative fields for a very long time, whether it not be working, just being around creative fields for a long time. So really it started off before this business came to the forefront. It started off with me being a producer for the main group that I was in. So from there, as things got more serious, as things like at the time got a lot like bigger than us, if that makes sense. Like I said, as we started becoming bigger, like bigger in the sense of like 40K monthly listeners bigger, we had
Yeah.
to be able to scale or really just be able to produce merchandise since that was something that people were interested in. So it started with me doing that back in my sophomore year, I think, or
Hmm.
sophomore or junior year. Actually, yes, junior year, my bad, junior year. It started me doing that in my junior year. And so just scaling it from my room, you know, while in high
Hmm.
school, just taking that first, like it's not something you can fully see out when you start, if that makes any sense. It's something you have to be in the process of at every step. So it's really more so about being grounded in those steps and trusting the process as opposed to being a perfectionist day one. Because by being a perfectionist, you're inhibiting yourself from truly making progress if you don't pace it well enough, if that makes sense. And so from then to now, I know that was something in retrospect, and even now that I struggle with. But again, it's about having the courage to put that foot forward and to, in the, for lack of better words, make it as you go, but not in the sense of not being prepared, but in the sense of if something goes wrong, being able to pivot, but also not inhibiting that potential wrong from making you take that first step, if that makes sense. So the courage comes from the conviction and those small steps being taken. So if you're not a confident person, the best way to prove to yourself if you don't have it is by doing small tests, for example, or doing small like runs. So like let's say for me what I did. So instead of doing 10 products at once or doing a full-on collection at once, just start for like one to two products, and see how that performs. So it's pretty much just dipping your toes into the market for lack of better words. Um so yeah, start off with a few products and then from there saying, okay, what is feasible, what isn't feasible, but also not being afraid to take on more than what you can handle in the sense when you first start off. So by not setting a limit for yourself at first, it helps you figure yourself out a little bit better because you can play it safe. But at the same time, with the level that I was at the time, playing it safe wasn't really much of an option in the sense that, okay, we do have X, Y, and Z on the table. Now, how can we make the most out of it at this time? Right? So for the longest, like my perspective was more so about damage control than being prepared, which is not good. I don't advise it. You should really be more prepared than having to focus on damage control. But that's just how it was at the time. But as the years went by and as I taken the steps to better further and better the things that I do and make it more efficient or streamline it for lack of better words. Really, that courage just kind of comes from, I guess, trust in myself, for lack of better words. So it's really, yeah, for lack of better words, just being convicted in what you do and being able to know that you bring something important to the table, if that answers your question. I think I missed like 10 other aspects of it, but
No,
just
but
let me
you,
know.
it's great. So back with to what you said about pivoting. How would you pivot when something went wrong?
So when something goes wrong, so because for lack of better words, I was involved at every step of most of the times, I'll say most of the times. Most of the times I was involved from top down and down the up. So that means like fully. So whether it be the planning, the coordinating, the production, the manufacturing and all that, I'll be involved at every step of the stage, even with customer service. Even now, I'm still involved with customer service. So my bad. What was the question again? I'm so sorry. What was the
Like
question again?
how do you pivot? Like when something went wrong, because you
Oh, when
just said
something
that
goes
you're
wrong.
involved in a lot of things, so that's can
Yeah.
be a lot of pressure. So when you made a mistake, how would you stay calm and try to fix it?
Okay, so to be honest, the first thing is realizing that your reaction is your reaction and you have to process that first. So whenever when something goes wrong, it's make sure first off it goes wrong in a way where it's minuscule at first, right? You don't want to actually have something that's a complete mess that you can't solve. So pretty much beforehand, just preparing in my own way by um putting things in place where if certain things go wrong, that fail safes for like a better word, like fail safes, yeah. So what I did was I always had a fail safe of some sort. So even if something out that came out the blue happened or went wrong, I made sure to have something in place to counter that, right? So let's say something happens regarding a customer's order, right? So something happens, the best thing you can do from a business to a customer, especially if you're direct to customer, is to be transparent, right? Customers value transparency more than anything. So when you're transparent with them about the process, it gives them a little bit more of a perspective of what you all do to provide that product, if that makes sense. So it allows them it kind of dissuades that illusion of the fact that, hey, this is transactional, and more like, hey, I and my team, we are people just as much as you are a person, and there's a lot of hands that go into this more than you think.
Mhm.
So that transparency helps alleviate it, but in terms of actually solving the problem, it takes sitting down and evaluating where things went wrong to actually see how you can better go about dealing with that problem, or even putting in better systems in place to prevent that problem going forward. But a lot of the times, whenever a problem does occur, first thing is just be transparent with the customer. If it's internally, we should be transparent with ourselves and figure out a better way to go about things here going forward. Because the best thing you can do is to, well, if a problem happens. But the best thing you can do from there on is to acknowledge that problem and go about it accordingly to make sure it doesn't happen again, you know? So I hope that answers your question.
It did, thank you.
Yeah.
So what would you have to say to like a middle schooler thinking about starting their own business or a high
If you're in
school?
middle,
I mean,
yeah.
sorry.
Either or, either or. So the thing is, when you're underage trying to start a business, there's a lot
Mhm.
more that goes into opening the accounts necessary than if you're an adult. There's like a lot more checks that go into place, and you definitely need a guardian to help manage this, a lot of aspects. But to be honest, the first thing you should do if you have an idea is to ground that idea in reality. Because it's one thing that I have an idea, it's another to act upon it. And in order to act upon it, I would say you have to ground it first in reality. So I wouldn't say you necessarily need to do everything that college would tell you that you need to do to start your own business. Like you don't need to do a full-on market evaluation. You don't need to do a full-on SWOT analysis or anything like that of the sort. To be honest, all you need to do is like know how to make your idea come to reality first and foremost. And then those kind of things come later. Like those things come later whenever you actually have to like be t 10 toes for lack of better words. I'm not sure like a better way to phrase that. But that aside, I would say grounding is the first thing. And then once you're grounded in your perspective and knowing what you can do, you gotta wind down from idea to reality in terms of like how can I break this down into being something more realistic. So if you're going to start an online business, for example, one thing you need to know how to do is know how labels work. And so by labels, I mean shipping labels in the sense of like, okay, there's different carriers that exist, right? You have USPS, UPS, FedEx, etc. This is kind of an anecdote, but those are things you have to be mindful of, and being geopolitically aware is another thing because what happens around the world affects exactly how you get your product out, regardless of if you acknowledge it or not, especially if a larger supply chain is involved, globally speaking, right?
Right?
So for I'm not sure. So
Mm.
that's more so for online businesses, but even then, if you're going to do something that's more in person or less formal, just be mindful of how you get your supplies, right? How how sure you are being able to get those sets of plots to make the product that you're trying to provide. If it's a product, now if it's a service, it's a different story. If it's a service, I'm not too well acquainted with that in order to speak on that. But we'll say there are processes that do exist in order to be able to make that happen as well. But just from a like top level perspective, going like not too specific, that is the best first step I think you should take. You want to touch up on like more steps, or you just want to just keep it
No,
there?
that's good. So you said about being transparent. Like, how are you very transparent? Transparent, because you seem like a very transparent person.
Yeah. So I'm transparent in the sense that I don't hold up a facade. So if something is the way it is, I just will tell you how it is in the way that paints a picture, for lack of better words. Whether it sounds very what's the word? Vague, but you can paint the as long as the picture's being painted, then you're being transparent. It doesn't matter what brushes you use, what paints or oils you just have to paint that picture in a way that can be conveyed, regardless of who's looking at it, you know? So that's kind of like, for lack of better words, my perspective a lot of times with pretty much anything, just being able to paint that picture in a way where even if in the implicities that it's understood and not necessarily only the explicities, if that makes any sense. So that's kind of where my perspective of transparency comes from because I would feel guilty if I did something that I didn't agree with, if that makes sense. So if I knew if a customer had their order delayed, like recently, for example, just to get a bit more insight into what I do. So we've had plushies manufactured for the past couple months, but because of all the holidays, everything that's been going on, they were initially delayed, right? And so now I'm getting back. Now we're actually starting to get them in hand, like in person.
Right.
So there's so many emails that we got about delays, and the best thing we did throughout the entire time was be upfront about the delays, and that has alleviated the potential chargebacks and disputes we might have had to face up until this point, just because of the fact that a delay incurred that we didn't foresee. So in this case, um, the transparency helps in maintaining that trust between the customer and the business itself, right? And so what I did really was pretty much transparent with the process, and like I didn't really make a template for how it would respond. Although at a bigger scale, that is what's gonna be like the standard is to have like a standard response. But to make it more personable, I just didn't just because the team that I work with is really just me and one other person. You know what I mean?
Right.
Despite how big it is. So instead of just trying to approach it from a more corporate or more like in human perspective, I try to make it more as human as possible, especially considering that this is in
Mhm.
the music industry. You
Right.
know what I mean? Like these are fans we're talking about, not like customers. Like these are people that support us outside of just, what we do regarding the merchandise that we make. Like they support the music that we release and all that. So I've been trying to make it personal as possible because these are people that can meet at any point. You know what I mean? And so every interaction has a lasting impression, whether we see it or not. So I try to keep that in mind. Although naturally I keep it in mind, I try to keep it in mind for the fact that like, hey, these are people. These are people who had expectations that weren't unfortunately not met. And so I feel guilty as much as they feel bad, you know?
Mhm.
So I try to use that to my advantage and being able to maintain that connection, regardless of who it is.
Right. So, what business skills do you have? Like, what are some main ones you prioritize? I know transparency is one, but what are some others?
Planning and foresight, that's the main thing, to be honest. Even if you don't have the foresight, like let's say like 5 to 10 years in the future, because that's so long and so far ahead as somebody who's like 19 still, like
Right.
that's way like not way too far, but you know what I mean. I also have that kind of foresight compared to others, but having the foresight to at least know a next step or a next few
Mhm.
steps, or know or have different plans in place, or being able to plan for certain things, like that's the main skill that I have. That's mainly what I bring to the table. And really, perspective is another thing, right?
Mhm.
People are often caught up in their own rhythms, for lack of better words, or caught up in the emotion of what they're doing. And so being able to ground yourself in everything that's going on and have that perspective to see cut and cleared through everything that's going on, and being able to provide that perspective like, hey, this, that, and the third, I think X, Y, and Z, and just seeing how it goes, that's a good skill that I think that I've kind of grew and grown to have over like the years. Another one I would say, I don't even know if these are like concrete or not. I don't think these are like concrete quote unquote skills, but these are the skills that I would know personally at least. Another would be more likely than not my ability to pivot.
All
Just
right.
being able to, if anything goes wrong, just being able to make it right. Not even just in the short term sense, but being able to make a solution that precedes just the now and something that can be a new standard going forward, if that makes any sense. Those are just a few. There's probably not probably, there's definitely a lot more, but right now, just not the top of my head. I apologize for that.
No, you're good. So you said in your like team that it's only like two people and you and one other person. So what
Yeah.
are the benefits of just being you and one other person?
So the benefit of it just being me and one other person is that although we both do a lot, it
Hmm.
gives us a lot more leverage in everything else that we do. You know what I mean? So at times we can decide to like it's mainly us two, but depending on the
Hmm.
project, we'll outsource a few things. So I know for some music videos, we've outsourced and handled creative teams for those. Like we've hired people to do 3D work, 3D animation, and all that for certain music videos. But just because it's two of us, it makes it way easier. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So with like a full-on like scaled corporate job or a scaled job, the issue with that is that things get muddled regarding how divisive it is and like, oh, we have a team that does this, this, and that, third. And there's a hierarchy that's present that can often become muddled if not proceeded about correctly, right?
Hmm.
And so with a business at scale and on those kind of scales, the problem that comes about it is that things become too inhuman in the sense that
Right.
the people under or above or next to you don't seem like they are so close as they actually are. You know what I mean? So like
Hmm.
with the business, like my other side job, with my side job, that's like hourly, for example. Um, although there are different roles and whatnot, realistically, you could put everybody in a room. if that makes sense. Like these are only like maybe like 10 people at most, maybe 10 to 12 people. Like these are people you can easily sit down and have a conversation with, you know what I mean? And so because it's only two of us, we don't necessarily have to deal with that kind of muddled information or that kind of hierarchy being present in the sense of like, hey, we can sit down whenever and discuss whatever we have to discuss, if that makes any sense. While
Okay.
also making sure that everything is set in stone. And again, because it's just two of us, way easier to get things done, way easier to implement X, Y, and Z, so long as we check each other, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So does your knowledge from basically kind of running a business go into your other job?
It does, since my business at first really was just like an e-commerce job in the sense of like I do own the domain for the website. I do ship out everything. I do handle how the payment processing is integrated and whatnot. Like I manage all of that. So my job as an e-commerce specialist at my other job, although it's way more minuscule in the sense that like I'm only sticking to one platform, and that one platform, like I just do pretty much the same things, but not nearly as much since they're two different businesses. Um, it's pretty much like seamless regarding this integration, but I will say one thing that differs, or, well, my bad. Before I say that, me mind restating the question, I apologize.
You're good. So you run your own business. You said you're very transparent, but do you think your transparency can be a problem sometimes?
No, it can't, well, it depends on how you, again, that's what I was saying about like the painting. Like, I can't call it an analogy because it's not really an analogy, but you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
the issue that comes with transparency that a lot of people have is the bluntness and how it's presented. But again, like I said, it's about, well, those aspects more so integrate into what I was saying regarding how you paint that picture, right? The picture's being painted, but depending on who it is, you have to paint it a certain way or with certain oils or pastels, certain brushes, right? So it's like I don't really have that issue since I have the awareness of like who I'm talking to, for like a better words.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna be full on blunt with somebody about X, Y, and Z if I know how everything is, right? Or if I know what kind of relationship we have, or I know where things lie as they are, right? Or just being able to see a few moves ahead with the other person, just seeing like, okay, how can we make this mutually beneficial, right? And so with that transparency in mind, just being able to frame it in a way where a lot of things are on the table and there's a lot of implicities also stated underneath the explicities, but in
Right.
a way where it's like, okay, nobody feels like they're being targeted or hurt, if that makes sense, right?
Right. So thank you so much. It was great. Uh, I had a great time talking to you. And is there anything else you'd like to say before we stop here?
Regarding anything else you'd like to say, to be honest, if there is something that I could say, I mean, do you have any personal questions?
No, I'm good.
That's fair. Um, I'm trying to think of if there's anything I might have went amiss with. I don't think so. I don't think
Okay.
so. But yeah,
Thank
thank you
you.
for
Have a
interviewing.
great day.
Yeah, likewise.